another Mentor on Video. And we are now here with Evelyn. Evelyn, what was really interesting in school that you have used later on?
Well, in middle school, I actually went to a Montessori middle school, so we didn't have tests and there wasn't really a focus on memorizing information. It was more about learning how to research information and look up information, and that's something that I've used in high school and college, and I'll probably use for the rest of my life. We also really worked on learning how to write, not just write standard essays, but really learn how to write well, and we read a lot of essays by a lot of different authors and spent a lot of time writing not just essays, but stories, research papers, and that again is something that I've used in high school and in college and hopefully will continue to use. Another thing that I found really useful that I learned in middle school that was actually not my favorite subject in middle school was the math that I learned. Because when I got to high school, I found that as boring as some of that pre-algebra was, as boring as that basic arithmetic was, I needed it to do anything interesting later in math. And I actually didn't think that the math program in middle school was all that strong. We didn't focus a whole lot on it. And I wish that I had, even though it was boring and even though it was kind of a drag at times, because later on when I got to calculus and things, I really wish that I'd had a stronger foundation in some of those basic things. And I'm still working on that in college. I've had to sort of make up for that. So that's something that's, I think, essential in middle school. The first time that I was really exposed to real scientists was really through a program at my high school, which was just a small girls' school in Connecticut called Westover. And they had and still have a great program called the Women in Science and Engineering program, which is an extracurricular program where you take extra classes in addition to your regular science classes on, usually it's Wednesdays and Saturday mornings, something like that. And it was a program that was sponsored both by Westover and by Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York. So they would advise Westover on the curriculum. They'd say, these are things that you really need to know if you want to go on to a career in science and engineering. So the first 2 years were things like extra mathematics, computer science courses, just basic things that anyone can use in science or engineering. And then the last 2 years were electives where you could choose from anything. And I chose courses such as computer architecture, where you learned how computers work, and geology, where I first really became exposed to geology, which is what I'm majoring in college, and got to go out on all these field trips and loved it. And these were in addition to sort of the basic chemistry, physics, mathematics, biology that you get, because there's a whole wide range of sciences. And it was great to have this program to see that, you don't just have to be a biologist or a chemist. There's a whole bunch of other things you can do in different combinations. Another science program I took in the WISE program was animal behavior as a high school course. That's really neat. And there's whole college programs dedicated to that. But the greatest thing about the program was that we would actually go out to RPI usually once a term, once a trimester, and meet with college students and professors and get to see real research, get to go through the real research labs and say, hey, maybe your science courses in high school aren't the greatest. You don't have a huge budget for laboratories, or you can't do research, but when you get to college, you can do real research, and that's where it starts to get really cool. I've read a lot of John McPhee over the years. He's a journalist. And he's written about all sorts of different topics, from birch bark canoes to oranges to actually a lot of geology topics. And I read a book of his that is related to my major called Annals of the Former World. And it's basically, it sort of tells the history of the geology of the North American continent. And it tells it sort of both from a scientific point of view and from sort of a cultural point of view, because McPhee wrote the book by basically traveling around the country with different geologists for about 20 years. And so the book goes into the personalities of these geologists, and everyone from, one of my favorite characters in the book is a character named, a real person too, named David Love, who worked in Wyoming and basically single-handedly mapped much of Wyoming's geology, which later became important for oil and different resources. But this is a guy who spent half of his life sleeping outside under the stars. And it was just neat to see sort of see geology from that view. I mean, see scientists as people, and to see sort of the geological community as a culture within American culture, and sort of the culture of the road and traveling and doing field work. Another book which I read recently was actually a trilogy called The Princess Trilogy, and it was about the life of a Saudi princess from the Saudi royal family. And in school I'm also an Arabic major, but this is not really related to my major. It's just something I read because I came across it in a bookshop one day. And it's fascinating. It was actually ghostwritten by an American, and you don't know the identity of the princess because she was worried that by writing this book, her life would be in danger. And it's just fascinating because you get a glimpse into the very extravagant lifestyle of the Saudi royal family. And you see it from sort of the point of view of a mother and wife in this culture, and you see that she sort of simultaneously has everything and has nothing, because in her country she doesn't have any rights. And it's fascinating. I mean, this is a woman who would go to New York City and spend $600,000 in one day at one store, and yet she couldn't even drive a car back in her own country. And the contrast was just fascinating to read, and made me feel very lucky in my life in a lot of ways, and also aware that there's still a lot that needs to be changed.
Thank you very much for being another mentor on video. Sure. And we're going to present you with your own bumper sticker about you can become a mentor too. Great. Just have to ask her how.